10 of Culture Conversations. It's Christmas time, end of the year, so we are going to mix up the format a little bit. Today, I'm going to put George through his paces, asking him some questions about his career, the good times, the bad times, to get some insights and hopefully share some tips that people can use if faced with similar situations.
So this seat is feeling very hot. I'm just hoping that with it being Christmas, you're going to be half kind to me, at least.
I'll try. I'll be gentle.
Thank you.
I'll be gentle, George. Okay, so we're going to start with a tough moment that shaped your leadership. So maybe think about a time when maybe a difficult leadership task you had to take on, or a project that you had to deal with, George.
Okay, great first question. So I would probably say slightly more general answer, but with a specific example, if that's okay.
That's fine, George.
So the example would be delivering difficult messages.
Okay.
Personally, it's something that I've not shied away from in my career, but I think that is something that leaders often can look to take an easy route to delivering a message. They think by being soft and indirect, it's better for the person or team receiving a message.
Yep.
So I think throughout my career, Macdara, and yours, because obviously we've operated in the trenches together in banking, we've been faced with delivering difficult messages at different times, right? So for me, it's about, there are certain things you have to communicate to people. It's being as transparent and as direct as you can with those messages, but also showing emotional intelligence and kindness to know how people might react, being able to adapt to your message. Yeah. So an example I would probably give is a project that a team that I was managing were working on. Mm-hmm. It became pretty clear that the project was not going to be delivering the return on investment that leadership expected. And basically the message that I had to deliver was, even though there has been a lot of hard work and effort and calories have been burnt going into this, ultimately we're going to turn the lights off and we're going to stop working on this project.
Okay.
Because it wasn't going to deliver that return on investment.
Yeah.
So it was quite a challenging message. It had been ongoing for about 6 months, but it was something I had to face head on.
Okay. So how did you prepare for that conversation? Did you do it to the team individually? And what was at the forefront of your mind in terms of how to land that properly?
So I think I'd start with the end in mind, actually. Yeah. With that conversation, it was very much, there was a message that needed to be delivered.
Yeah.
But then thinking about how, there's the old saying, know your audience. I knew my team well, knowing the right way to deliver a message to the individuals and bringing them together as a team to be able to do it. So the approach I took was to speak to them as a team, but then also in advance of that meeting, consult with them one-on-one to explain what the thinking was, to explain, that this is not a personal attack on anyone.
Yep.
This is about delivering value for the business. But ultimately my approach was, and always will be in kind of difficult communications, to communicate what needs to be communicated, but through a human lens, applying that empathy to understand that people are going to be disappointed. People might be frustrated, upset. Offering them support coming out of that message in terms of saying, I understand this might be difficult. I'm here for you. I'm able to speak with you afterwards. And then following through with your commitment to those individuals. So if you say that you're going to be there for them, not then disappearing off into an ivory tower and not, being there. So very much I was there for people. I helped them understand the reasons behind the decision being taken, and then was there for them afterwards as well.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess there it was about articulating the business decision rather than it being some sort of personal issue. Yeah. Okay. Great. Moving to more positive
Excellent.
land. What about a moment where leadership really worked? So, maybe a really good team you were in, a great boss, or a project where everything really just aligned?
Okay, so I'd probably use the latter. The project example. I've been really fortunate in my career to have worked in some and on some fantastic projects. I remember when I worked for one of the banks that I worked for, we were, as part of a piece of new business, we were asked to set up a new legal entity for the business.
Something anyone working in banking would be very familiar with.
Right, we've probably all got the battle scars from doing that.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I took from that project was that it was quite a disparate group of people that were brought together.
Yeah.
Clearly, when you do something that complex within a complex environment as well, lots of moving parts, you need to have the right team members executing on that. So we had people from across all the different, functions, middle, back office, front office, were all brought together to work on something in a pretty time constrained manner.
Okay.
It was high pressure, it was intense. But one of the things that made it so positive was that there was an enormous amount of clarity. So the people, the sponsors, the people who were leading the change, it was made very clear from the outset why this was being done, what was being done, how this was important for the business, but crucially, what our roles were individually, but also as a team.
Okay.
We were successful. We set it up in time for what was essentially a new product issuance for the bank. So it needed to be done in a certain time, and we achieved that. And actually, we all came away from that winning an award. Okay. And it's something I've still got on my desk at home. I think being able to celebrate success and look back on that as a milestone in not just my career, but the others around me is really fantastic.
Great. So you said clarity from the sponsors. What else were maybe the 2 or 3 key elements of that success, would you say?
It's a good question, actually. So capability, what we had, we were very blessed with the team that we had. And it's not just about change skills or just about execution skills. It was about the diversity of skills that everyone brought. When it came together, it was like a melting pot of people and ideas and contributions and skill sets. That capability was really clear from the outset that we weren't going to be lacking.
And was that because of the opportunity that everyone kind of sent their best to work on this project?
I think so. I think it was high importance. It was recognised as being something we really couldn't fail on.
Yeah.
So, and that goes back to the clarity point, right? It was emphasised from the outset just how important this project, this initiative was. Okay. And then the third thing I would say, you'll laugh at this because I talk about it all the time, was active governance. So we had a great example of ongoing dynamic governance that didn't get in the way of us making progress. It enabled us to do more, to do better, to do it faster, to remove blockages. And it was a really fantastic example of that.
Great. Sounds great. Clarity, capability, governance.
Absolutely.
I like it. Okay, great. Now, can we so we've had a tough conversation. We've had a super project. What about something that was more of a mixed bag? So a difficult situation you had to fix. And in doing so, what did you learn about how to tackle a similar type of challenge?
I feel like I'm being interviewed here, Macdara.
Give me an example, George.
Yeah. So I would probably give the example of where, so if I think back to when kind of you and I started in banking, there was a lot of emphasis, and there still is to a certain extent, but there was a lot of emphasis on removing cost from the business through offshoring. And that will never go away. It will probably never change. But what I found at certain points in my career is that there was a rush to offshore things that maybe weren't quite mature enough. And it was almost, we're going to recognise the risk, we're going to disregard it slightly just because we want to save the money, lower the headcount, whatever.
Well, I think it was often, usually, let's pick the most manual, horrible tasks and ship them off. Yeah.
So, and that kind of leads into the story, actually, or the example. I actually inherited a team and a function whereby some of the processing manual, to your point, the manual processing that was quite complex, actually, and some of it actually ended up with reports being sent to regulators, had been offshored. And what we found was that there was a lack of control, which was one of the problems.
Mhm.
But the second problem was that the way the offshoring had been completed, there were operating procedures, as you would expect.
Mhm.
But actually, because the task was complex and it was manual, it actually required people to operate outside of procedure and outside of policy. And because of certain cultural factors, but also the way the team had been set up,
Mm.
people just weren't comfortable with, operating outside of the swim lane that had been set up
Okay.
for
In
them.
terms of ambiguity and using judgment and not just
Not just
paint by
executing.
numbers and doing
Yeah.
it in a certain way each time.
So what that resulted in was that there was a bit of a dynamic that built over time, and it tends to be the way with these sorts of things. It wasn't an overnight thing,
Yeah.
but a dynamic built whereby things would either not quite get done or not quite get challenged and questioned because one party would assume that the other was doing it or was checking it,
Okay.
and actually it resulted in some errors,
Yep.
resulted in some inefficiency. We basically had to do a full review of things that had been outsourced because it was recognised that we couldn't just carry on like this.
Yep.
Certain things were brought back onshore.
Mm-hmm.
There was automation put in place for things that could be automated.
Yeah.
But we had to take quite a forensic lens to what had been outshored and kind of rewind some of that to fix issues that had been built over time.
Yeah. Okay. And what for you then in that experience? What your kind of reflections on that? What did you learn from that?
So what did I learn from that? I learned that certainly when it comes to outsourcing and offshoring, it's important to make sure that there is a level of maturity to the things that are being moved to a different team, a different location. It doesn't matter where.
Mm-hmm.
But also, and this is something that actually I have held on to ever since then, and it's whilst you can offshore and outsource that responsibility or the doing, you have to maintain accountability for the thing, and there has to be leadership, oversight, governance around that. See, I mentioned governance again, always, but there has to be that element of control, irrespective of whether something is being done out of sight.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it can be out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Something goes wrong. It's it remains your problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, so we've done our tough moment. We've done our where it worked well, the turnaround moment, and the best team you've ever been part of. If you were, giving someone advice, I guess, who was earlier in their career, who had to who's in that project space or in a management leadership space, what would you kind of give them as advice in terms of how to meet some of those challenges, having difficult conversations, dealing with difficult projects? What kind of advice would you give them in terms of how to manage that?
That's a great question, actually. And so one thing that I learned actually quite late in my career, but that I wish I'd have known earlier, is a saying that one of my old bosses taught me, and that's you've two ears, you have one mouth, use them in that proportion.
Yep.
And to me, the ability to listen, and not just listen, but actively listen to someone or to a team or to a meeting, is one of the most underrated communication and leadership skills that you can have. The ability to be in the moment, to understand not just what people are saying, but why they are saying it, being able to think dynamically to what could be the response to that.
Yeah.
Is massive, right? Actually being able to truly listen and truly understand problems, solutions, opportunities is really big. The second point, if I think about my experience as a manager and as a leader, I find people try to overcomplicate things. And I've seen it a lot in my career. And actually, I find the best managers and leaders just try to be good human beings.
Right.
Try to have that emotional intelligence, that empathy, that ability to relate to people, to put themselves in their shoes, to be able to put the people side of things front and center rather than having it as an afterthought, I think is really key. And probably one of the other things I would say is, again, a piece of advice that I was given actually quite late in my career. And again, I wish I'd have known it or had it in mind earlier, is that if you're invited to a meeting, there's a reason you're there.
Yep.
And it's not just to sit there or turn your Zoom camera off and be there silently. Or if you're on a meeting, if you're invited to join a governance meeting or a working group or whatever it might be, have ideas, be vocal, provide challenge, and theoretically and ideally, you work in an environment where that is embraced and it's recognised and rewarded, right? But I've seen it happen where people join meetings, they might feel a bit out of their comfort zone, and so they withdraw.
Yep.
And I think it's important to use those opportunities to their fullest, especially early in your career.
Yeah, great. So we have listen in proportion to your ears and mouth.
Yep.
Put people first.
Yep.
Think about the people element and lean in on that. And second and thirdly, even contribute. So if you're in a forum, make a contribution, get involved, step forward. Brilliant. Thank you very much, George. You've survived that. That brings us to the end of episode 10. I hope you enjoyed that, everybody. If you have anything you want to tell us, anything you would like us to talk about, please let us know and we will get onto that for you. With that, we will say goodbye. So it's goodbye from him.
And it's goodbye from me.